So this is something that I think a lot of us have had suspicions about with Disney in the past, and some of us actually have already kind of figured this out with certain clues, I guess, that we have had over the past few years. But to actually hear from someone who was an editor on Star Wars talking about Disney and how Disney was a place that was all about control, fear, and paranoia, to actually hear an editor from Star Wars, from Lucasfilm, say this about Disney, it gives a lot of credence to things that we have said. So let's go ahead and get into this, because I find this to be very interesting what this editor has to say about Lucasfilm, well, about Disney mostly. So former Lucasfilm editor and author J.W. Rinzler, who wrote The Art of Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, as well as the making of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. By the way, best movie ever to come from Star Wars. Best Star Wars movie ever, Revenge of the Sith. Absolute legend. So, recently detailed what it was like under Disney compared to George Lucas. Rinzler, who also wrote and directed the making of Star Wars, the definitive story behind the original film, chatted with the Force Cast podcast about his initial rejections from various Lucas-owned companies, as well as the interview that eventually landed him in the position of editor for Lucas Licensing's book division. Much of the beginning of the interview focused on what led to the creation of the making of Star Wars books. Rinzler detailed that Lucas was a pioneer and early adopter for quite a bit of new technology, including digital filming, which is indeed true. He then detailed his pitch for the making of Star Wars The Revenge of the Sith that led to the multitude of other books. Rinzler explained, the time I got there, I was in the book department. The book department, in a way, was lagging behind all that, though through nobody's fault. They were farming it out instead of doing it in-house. He added, when I came along, I think for the first time, I think most people in the department were more interested in Star Wars as a story, not how they were doing. I was like the first one, I think. I don't know for sure. At any rate, probably the first person to come in who wanted to know how they did the movies and had an interest in that. Rinzler then stated, so when I met with Rick McCallum, I pitched him the idea of doing a behind-the-scenes book for Episode 3 that didn't just talk about the visual effects, but talked about everything from concept art to editing to spotting the music to the scoring to the release of the film. And Rick, bless his heart, just in the office that moment said, yes, so let's do it. By the way, I love books like this. I love collecting making of books for different movies and stuff. I believe I have like 5 or 6 of Lord of the Rings alone, making of books that really just get into the details of what they did to bring it to life and all that stuff. I don't have any on Star Wars, but I do love these types of making of books. I think that these are so fascinating. So I'm glad that they actually did this, because it is fantastic. Oh, the forward of this was from Peter Jackson, which is pretty cool. That's pretty cool, actually. So I might have to check that out. He continued, they hadn't even released Episode 2 yet when I started documenting Episode 3, and that's how that happened, and eventually got to know George for a long time, and that led to all the other books. After detailing his initial experience with Lucas's book department, Rinzler is asked what made Lucas's storytelling different from other studios in the 80s and 90s. He responded, well, I mean, what was great about Lucasfilm and working at the ranch and the big ranch and so on, there was a lot of autonomy. We were only 30 people in the licensing department. It changed, fluctuated a little bit. We were 3 or 4 people in publishing. And those 30 people more or less oversaw international and domestic, the entire Star Wars franchise, from toys to skateboards. So, okay, so he's just kind of talking about Lucasfilm in general, I guess. I want to get to where he actually starts talking about Disney and stuff. So, Star Wars is big, but not that big, so they scaled things back for Episode 2, and then they maybe didn't do quite enough. And then Episode 3, we got it right. Okay. So, let's see. Where does he get to the juicy stuff about Disney here? He went on, okay, he added, or we've had one writer who is very much involved in feelings, who was a great writer, but had no sense for the action scenes. Okay. So he continues. Okay. He went on to detail that his first day on the job, he was given a copy of a VHS for the work in progress for Episode 2, and he needed to watch to understand what was going on in order to work on the book surrounding Episode 2. Then, as reported by Disney, Star Wars is dumb, he contrasted this experience with Disney taking over Lucasfilm. Here's the juicy stuff. Rinzler explained, when Disney came on, and I will say this, I don't think it violates any NDA, I had been there for 15 years. I worked with George Lucas for all those 15 years, and I couldn't see a script for the longest time for The Force Awakens. He continued, and so it was just the polar opposite way of working. It was all about control and fear and paranoia. Talking about Disney. Not that Lucasfilm, we had some of that. I mean, it wasn't like it was heaven on earth, but it was far and away like day compared to that night. It was just so much easier. And we didn't torture the licensees, he elaborated. He then continued to compare and contrast Disney with Lucas's style of management. Some of them could come in and read the script, not everybody, but the head person, whoever needed to read it for that company, could read it, and so that they knew what was going on. He concluded, and so there was just a lot of cooperation, a lot of sharing of information, and a lot of autonomy. If I decided a book was done and good, it was done. It was published. So he talks about Disney and how there is apparently a really deep contrast behind Disney and Lucasfilm. They're very different from each other in a lot of ways, and that's something that I think a lot of us have kind of figured out. I mean, Lucasfilm is kind of a company that was built on heart and passion in the projects and Star Wars and all that type of stuff. And Disney is just kind of this giant mega corporation that just kind of pumps out content willy-nilly and just continues to export, pop off box office success after box office success. And Lucasfilm wasn't really that way. Lucasfilm was about trying to create interesting stories and stories that mattered, stories that would live on. And they did that successfully, obviously. And Disney Star Wars just isn't hitting that same magical experience like Lucasfilm was when Lucasfilm was under Lucas back in the day. And I find this to be very interesting. And I would rather have the Lucasfilm version of what he is talking about here rather than the Disney version, because I think that is where you get good stories from. And the way that Disney apparently runs things over there, it doesn't sound like that they really focus on that type of stuff. But somehow people continue to go see their movies. So it blows my mind. It really does. But yeah. Of course, Disney is very focused on, just kind of rehashing a lot of their old content, a lot of their old films, and these live action versions and all that type of stuff. So it makes sense, I guess, that people would want to go see those, and it's just like an easy buck for Disney. But yeah, so the fact that he says that Disney was all about control and fear and paranoia, I find that to be very interesting. And Lucasfilm doesn't really sound like that it was quite that way, which is pretty cool. So, I'm sure we can all agree that we want the old Star Wars back again. And the way that Disney is running things is just not the right way, obviously. They just continue to fail. They just continue to sink in the numbers when it comes to the Star Wars films that they're putting out. And, we need to get back. They need to get back to a time where where Star Wars had that magic about it. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what you think about what J.W. Rinzler has to say about Disney and about Lucasfilm and the contrast there between the two companies. He says it's like a day and night contrast, which is crazy. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think, and subscribe here at Geeks and Gamers if you're new. I'd greatly appreciate that as well. And also go check out my personal channel, Josiah Rises, and subscribe over there as well. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.